Good morning, my name is Randy Northup. Today we're going to start talking about the codes and how we got here and what does those codes mean and can you apply them in the real life situation. We're also going to look at some of our damage inspection data and kind of compare the two of them. So the first slide here is, I think, a very good point to start with. Our codes didn't come here all in one day. We didn't get here over one event. It was a series of events that slowly built those stricter codes into place. But the key point right here is that any structures built before 2009 were built before the CUWI codes, and those structures built after that point for areas of fire hazard severity zones in the CUWI area are built to those codes. That's a big number right there. That's about 10% are built to the current codes that we have now. Now, that is a big number, but let's multiply that even by a larger number. We're having fires in Colorado. We're having fires in Oregon, Washington. All those states have different building code requirements for their CUWI codes. So it is a very big challenge what we have. So it's the picture. It's really easy. Somebody had made mention earlier. It's really easy to build to those CUWI codes for the new builds. The challenge is how do we retrofit those 2.1 million homes to lower the chance of them burning down in a wildfire. So I highlighted 3 major incidents, wildland fires, that affected a lot of our building codes. There was others fires that built upon those codes, but these are 3 critical ones. 1961, we had the Bel Air fire. I don't remember how many acres burned, but almost 500 homes were destroyed. It was that fire that started putting the Sacramento in motion to start getting some bills passed, right? So that created really our Public Resource Code 4291, which started to push that defensible space. Then in 1991, we had the Oakland Hills fire, which with that, we started looking at what are some of our hazards. And we started creating our fire hazard severity zone maps and identifying areas and houses that could be in wildfire prone areas. The fire that I'm a little bit more familiar with, because I was actually on the 2003 fire siege, we had approximately 9 or 10 major fires in Southern California. We burned close to 8,000 structures. The biggest fire out of all of them was the Cedar Fire right here in San Diego County. Burnt close to 6,000 structures total, 273,000 acres had been burned. That particular Santa Ana wind event really pushed the governor in motion. They created a Blue Ribbon Commission that started looking at how are these structures burning down and can we change our building codes to lower the risk. So that was kind of like what shot-putted our home hardening and our building codes into that CUWI element. So what does that mean? Essentially, we had a mess. We had a puzzle pieces all over the place. We had our minimum fire safe regulations, we had our defensible space, we had our Chapter 7A building codes, essentially in multiple different code sections. So it was really hard to find. And things were missed because maybe they didn't know where to look at different areas. Well, the good thing is, almost after 18 years, starting in 2025, they passed the CUWI code, which went into effect only 6 weeks ago, January 1st of 2026. It brought all of those codes into one centralized location of Title 24, Part 7. So that makes it a lot easier for anybody to go look at these CUWI codes. Now, a lot of times people think, well, the CUWI codes are only D-space or maybe only home hardening. We look at everything. We look at how wide intersections should be, how wide roads should be. All those things play factor in to the safety of the community in these events of these major wildfires. So now let's start looking at some of the data that we have. So this slide here represents the before our CUWI codes, the graph on the left, and houses built to the CUWI code on the right. And you can see that time frame started in January of 2018 and ran through 2025. So that includes the Camp Fire, Palisades, Eaton fires, or to name a couple of the fires that includes. We see at the top there's 5 different colors: red, green, yellow, orange, and black. Those all represent some different data that we collected doing our DINS collection. The red represents a structure that was totally destroyed, burnt down to the ground. The green represents affected. That's 1 to 10%. That could be maybe a window that cracked but never broke out, right? That did not maybe allow the fire to get in, but there was some type of damage around that structure. Then we see a little tiny yellow line that has minor, which has 10 to 25% affected. And then we have our major damage, which is 25 to 50% affected. And if you look at both of those graphs, the yellow and orange is almost really hard to see. Because the reality is once that fire gets established, it's pretty much going to burn that house all the way to the ground. The only way that those houses did not fully burn to the ground was there had to have been some type of fire department intervention, an engine company, a truck company putting water on there to keep it from burning all the way to the ground. But the big thing is look at how many homes are surviving these fires from post-CUWI code effects. So starting in 2009 forward, that's almost 63% compared to the houses before. And there's a lot of things that contribute to that. Not only is it what's being built for those houses, the building materials, but also the vegetation and all the different stuff around that parcel as well. So I don't have a slide for this, but November of 2024, we had the mountain fire over in Ventura County. There was approximately 1,200 structures that were destroyed, that were within the fire's perimeter footprint. And only 28 of those structures were built to the CUWI codes. And out of those 28, only one of those structures burnt down. So you could see that definitely building our structures out of the CUWI materials lowers that chance of ignition. So I know there was a question that was brought up earlier with Steve Hawk's presentation. This represents only the Eaton fire. And we have in the area, we have our different fire hazard severity zones. We have it in red, orange, and yellow, which is very high, high, or moderate. But we have a section on the Eaton fire that was unzoned. We had 6,300, and I think it was 13. Let me get my number here. 6,319 structures that burnt down that wasn't even classified in a fire hazard severity zone. So like Steve had made mention earlier, they're building to a different standards because of the location of where those parcels are located. So that's why it's a little bit different challenge on the Eaton compared to the Palisades. Here's a great picture that we got from the LA Times a couple years ago. I can't remember which fire this was taken off of, but you could see all those embers whirling around that structure, around that firefighter, starting to ignite that ornamental vegetation. But look at the back corner, kind of behind that firefighter, look at that doorway. It creates really like a little eddy effect, and look at how all those embers are landing in there. So if you have any type of combustible materials or another common item that's in front of every door, nobody wants to have a dirty house, so they have their doormat there. That's another item that catches fire that we see during our DINS assignments. And that was another key number. 1 in 8 acres had burned over this 10-year time frame throughout the state of California. So one of the things we get to do, like Steve had mentioned earlier, we get to work with 3 different major research institutes. So we learn a lot from them. They all do a little bit different studies, and we gather information from them. We take that back. One of my job assignments that I do on a day-to-day basis, we gather that information back and also set on the CUWI code panels as we start looking at how to improve the codes moving forward. In 2024, a Fire Safety Research Institute did a lengthy study on windows and how should the tempered windows be. Should the tempered be on the living side? Should be on the outside of the windows? And they did a major study. Well, one of the things we got to do on the Palisades is we got to work with them and IBHS, and they started going around looking at those windows to see if their tests that they did in their laboratory matched up similar to the results that we saw out on the fire lines. Now they're taking that document. We're now looking at how we can reword the code for the next triennial cycle, which should come out in 2028. Another big research company that we work with was the National Institute of Standard Technology. After the Camp Fire, CAL FIRE partnered up with them, and they went in and did a detailed post-fire analysis. They started talking to firefighters, getting ring cams, all that information, to try to understand how these fires are burning through that subdivision. And one of the big things that we came out of that program is the hazard mitigation methodology. It pretty much identified 16 different common items we will find on our parcels that can lead fire through our parcel, getting closer to our structure. Those includes how many people have houses, right? We should all live in a house. We probably have a car. We probably have wood piles. We have gazebos, we have decks, we have all those different things that can lead that fire right back to the structure. And in this particular example, you see that that gazebo is a long ways from that structure, has good structure separation back to the deck. But if you can look to the left, you see the brown line that outlines that's a combustible gate. Essentially, as that gate starts burning, it will lead right back to the RV, to the deck, to the house. So in 2021, we had a little fire in Nevada Yuba Plaza called the River Fire near where I live. I was a division. I had no engines. I had like 4 engines. They were all working. And I just started driving around house to house to see what I could do. We came across one house. The whole property, half acre, was surrounded by a wooden fence. All burnt up. It was burning the last 5 feet to that house, burning through the gate. It would have burned right up to the combustible side and eventually led that structure to ignition if we hadn't got there to remove that. We noticed that on a number of houses on the campfire, engine companies going in there and just removing that 5 to 8 feet of a gate right by the house. That was the difference between whether that house survived or burnt to the ground. So that's breaking apart those fire paths. And this outlines those 16 different categories that most of those have. ADUs, barns, carports, boats. Anybody have railroad tied retaining walls or steps on their parcels? That's another big item that if that railroad tie gets burning with the creosote oils, it burns for a long time that could lead that fire path right back to the structure. Wood piles, ornamental vegetation, which every parcel is going to have 1, 2, maybe even 6 of these things or even more. So these are all very common things that we will find on our parcels that we should be looking at. So some of the home hardening retrofits that we do, definitely you see up there in the vents like Steve had made mention earlier, going from those 1/4-inch vents down to those CUWI approved vents drastically lowers the chance of embers getting in there. Somebody had asked a question earlier about how often does those fires pop up later. I'm going to highlight one of our great DSIs that work up in Sonoma Lake, Napa County. During the Palisades fire, the fire had burned through probably 3 to 4, 5 days before. She walked through that property. Something didn't seem right. She walked the other way around the property. She could smell some smoke, but she's like, that doesn't smell right. She walked it a third time. Third time she caught the angle as the sun was going down, and they were starting to get a little bit of smoke coming out of the attic. So she was able to go get an engine company and pull them over and actually save that house from burning down. So yes, it can happen a couple days later as well. Some other things that we look at, part of that hazard mitigation methodology, is if we have combustible siding all the way down to the ground, we increase that chance of ignition, right? Because what gathers up next to the house, especially in a windy day? Leaves, pine needles, all those light flashy fuels that are really easy to ignite. So one of our home hardening retrofits recommendations is taking that bottom 2 feet and making it non-combustible materials to prevent that ignition to starting up, burning at the bottom of that siding and burning upwards. And you can see here's an example of somebody replacing their combustible gate and putting in a non-combustible gate there to replace it. So IBHS has obviously done several different tests that they've done. Here's just outlining some of them that we actually work with them, and we take that information and we put it into our curriculum and we present that out to our different trainings as well. But the vulnerabilities of decks and embers, they took a test and they lit underneath the deck for decks that were built with wooden joists, and they compared that to ones that were built with steel columns or steel joists that had that break of separation, and you can see a big drastic reduction in fire compared to the two. And also whether or not that fire starts at top of the deck and then burns down, burns a lot slower intensity than if it starts underneath the deck and burns upwards. So those are some of the things we were hoping to show you. Oh, there it goes. This one is the non-combustible metal joists. You see how much slower that's burning. And then hopefully this video will show here in a second. Now here's the time we got to play a game. Got to be truthful with me. How many people have anything stored underneath their deck? We got one honest person in the group. We got two, three in the back. Okay, so that's why it's important that we don't put those flammable, combustible materials underneath that deck, because once they get started, you can see how much quicker that actually ignites and starts burning upwards. So with that, we have a whole division within Office State Fire Marshal called the Fire Engineering and Investigation Division. They deal with all the research. They deal with all the flame testing for products. We don't deal with that in our group, but they actually go out there and get products that are on the list that meets the CUWI compliance for all the various testing. That includes the ICC testings, the International Code Councils, ASTM testings, in order to put that in the guide, and that helps people to make some better choices of what they're going to utilize for their retrofits. So with that, we have a QR code here. Take it if you'd like. It pretty much provides all the information that we give out to a lot of our classes. It has everything in there from individuals can do a home hardening assessment or defensible space self-assessment on their property. Fill out that information. It will kick you back some recommendations, what they would recommend you can do, to various different case research studies that we have on there as well. With that, the challenge now is, how do we get our homes retrofitted? Where do we find that at? So under that Title 24, Part 7 of the CUWI code, there's actually an appendix that outlines just our home hardening recommendation retrofits in that code. So hopefully that can help the 2.1 million homeowners to start moving that needle forward a little bit more.